I was 19 then. Most people felt that if Australia was at war, that it was just natural to join and become a member. And that was a universal feeling. All the young people of my class, my age, they were quite unusual if they didn't feel that way. And at the age of 18, I'd already joined the militia, and when the AIF was formed, I was 6 months underage, but no one questioned it. And that was that. So it was a general belief, and I don't feel that my thoughts have ever changed. I do think that under similar circumstances, our country is such that it has a warm feeling of protection. And no question arose. It was just a normal thing to do and a natural thing to do, and we wanted to do it. I couldn't imagine being on a ship, and I couldn't imagine being up in the air. And my father had been a soldier in the Boer War, and I suppose it was just a natural feeling to join the army, which I did. I joined the army, and I was younger than I should have been, but no one seemed to worry very much about that, at least before me. And I was fairly good at mathematics, and I joined an artillery unit, and I became the artillery sergeant, and I must have impressed them sufficiently because they sent me to an officer's school in Sydney, and that was rather an intense sort of thing, but I did well at it, and I think I topped the course. And I was the first in the 10 that came down from Queensland to this officer's school. One of them failed, and I think I came top of the school. So obviously I was cut out to do it, and I did it. And I was one of the first in Queensland, of course, to go to my original unit as a reinforcement lieutenant, and I was being good at mathematics. I was in charge of their artillery survey. I was their survey officer, and that was the capacity in which I served. The result of the meeting of the Japanese and the Australian and British armies, when we're not leaning on the fact that there were huge numbers against us, but it was about a 20-to-1 adjustment between the numbers of the Japanese and ourselves, and we lost an enormous number in action. You know, in a unit of 500, 600, we lost something like 350, battle in the battlefront, and I don't know that we did all that much damage, but the Japanese are a race that seems to almost encourage abrasion and death. If anyone does anything they don't like, they take their head off. And that's a pretty constant pattern that they've followed over centuries. They've followed that sort of century behaviour over a period of 1,000 years, not just, the last 100 years or so. And that's their attitude towards it, towards death, and certainly towards coming up against something. They'll take their head off. They won't have any more trouble. And it was an unpleasant war from that point of view. As far as we were concerned, we'd done very well coming down the peninsula. We had been there for a month or so before the Japanese landed, and we had planned an attack on the Japanese by disguising our weapons, and we'd arranged for that. And of course my work, survey, was very important, and we managed to manipulate the Japanese, that was a group of Japanese that were attacking us, and we managed to have them. Malaya, of course, is a country that's a lot of people have grown rubber and other materials there, and the Japanese came through this cultivated country, and we managed to disguise our troops as being present. We had several infantry units with us, and they avoided contacting the Japanese as they came through, and we set up a trap for them, and they came into the trap, and as artillery we were focused on where we wanted them to be, and terrible to look back on thinking how we killed people, but we probably killed a whole unit, whole battalion. 3,000 or 4,000 people came into our trap, and we had our artillery focused on that area, and when they'd come through into it, we blasted them. And we lost some 2,000 to 3,000 men ourselves. The Japanese would have lost 5,000 to 6,000. So in wartime, we considered that a success. After our capture, the Japanese allowed us to send troops back to this battlefront, and we were able to bury all our men who were killed. And the men also made, the men who were doing this work, they made with local material. They made a large wand. They made a special wand, out of the local material, and they planted this where we buried all our men. And the 18th Battalion Infantry was all Queenslanders. This was the infantry that was working with us, and they were preceded in World War One, if we can spread the tale to that, and there is a similar wand that was made on the battlefields of France in 1918, and that wand is in a church in New South Wales, and they took the wand that we had made for this particular battery, and it has been brought back to Australia, and it lies in this church in a town on New South Wales. It is there as a memorial to all the men who died. The Japanese general, they were all nasty creatures by our standards, and when our senior medical officers said we have a lot of wounded, we can't get out to Changi without a lot of support, and the Japanese general virtually said every man will go out to Changi, all the wounded will walk the distance if need be, get cracking. This is an order of the Japanese Navy, Japanese Army. It must be obeyed. And that was their reaction. So everybody walked the 20 miles out to Changi, and that was that. We were left Changi to go up onto the railway. There was a great deal of talk, and everyone was saying, oh, well, you're a lieutenant, the officers aren't likely to work. They're probably only being taken up so that they can supervise the work of the workers. Ha, ha, ha. And when we did get up there, the train from Changi took us up to the border of Burma, of Thailand, and from there we had another, some of them had 200 miles to walk, and they'd been prisoners for 2 years at this stage, and there were a lot of very ill people at that stage, and particularly our medical officers did their utmost to try and persuade the Japanese to provide transport, and the Japanese simply held their hand up and said, every man will walk, and many men just died. And those that made it were the workforce that went on. They had huge numbers, thousands and thousands of prisoners, and during most of the time in Burma, we're all pretty sick. My doctor, he would swear that he was being paid richly for his work, but the way he talked to you, you'd feel that he was being paid very richly just to do a simple job like amputate a couple of toes. When we were taken prisoners, of course, they didn't improve. And I had told to an earlier story as they decided that the Japanese would increase their chances of success by building a railway. Burma and Thailand generally are very much underdeveloped from that point of view, and they decided, well, quickest thing to do is put up a railway. We've got lots of labour, all these thousands of prisoners, and they took us up in large numbers, and they had a separate, not only did they not avoid using officers for work, and in general, in wartime, officers are captured, but traditionally they don't work. We're talking about our attitude between the British and the Germans and previous wars that happened, but not so for the Japanese. And they took us up as an officer course, a whole 500, 400 of us, and we went up, and we were one of their principal workforces, cutting through country that seemed to almost enjoy death, in that there was such a high incidence of disease, of cholera, malaria. Of course, everyone had malaria every day without any form of suppression. And but the greatest, although dysentery was pretty terrible, the greatest killer was acute diarrhea and multiple causes, and we just lost men in hundreds at a time, and there were huge numbers of both British and Australian troops. I think with the British troops, there were something about 150,000 prisoners, and they died like flies. My worst trouble was that we had over a period of 3 years, 4 years, we had the shoes that we were walking in, and they were never replaced, and the hard work we were doing, they just wore out. And very common diseases were to get what's called a tropical ulcer. We never see them in Australia. People think they've heard of them, but they've never seen it. And I got a tropical ulcer just walking to the work. We had to walk up a hill like that. That was about a mile and a half every day. And, with poor shoes, poor socks, if any. They rubbed on the shoes, rubbed on the feet, and tropical ulcers were so common, and practically they used to hurt like hell. I thought I'd never felt greater pain than I had with my tropical ulcer, but actually I did. I was in a tent. The weather had broken and the monsoons were just pouring out of the sky, and we had about 14 men under a tent fly, if you can imagine that, trying to sleep after a heavy day's work. And I got this blasted ulcer in the middle of my left foot, and it just ached and ached and ached, and I thought it couldn't possibly get worse, when all of a sudden I got a dreadful pain in my right toe, in the middle of the right foot. I realised I'd probably been bitten by something, and I scrubbed the bit of bed clothing that I had over my foot and sort of tied up whatever was there, and I rolled around for the rest of the night with pain in my right toe. I can laugh about it in the past, in the present, but it wasn't funny then. I lost all the pain that was just sort of aching in my left foot, and suddenly this dreadful pain in this right foot. And I was in, if you can imagine, 14 men under a tent fly, under pouring rain, not comfortable. And the rest of the morning, I got this pain in the right foot. Dawn came, and I cautiously took the things off the foot that I'd thumped on, and as I did, an enormous centipede ran off. I'd been bitten by a bloody centipede, and it was worse than the pain I had in the left foot. But by then my pain had come back, and we had this huge walk every day up almost a 45-degree for well over a mile. And anyway, in due course, the Australian doctors, we had 2 Australian doctors in the camp, one wonderful fellow from Sydney, and he was the sort of fellow that made you feel as though he made you feel good just by talking to you, and he made you feel as though he was being paid thousands of dollars for any operation he might do on you. And he said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Goodwin, but I think the only way to treat that foot is to take the toe off." So he immediately set to, and I don't know what sort of anaesthetic he gave me, if any, and he took the toe off, and it healed, got better. I got back to work, and that was that. But that's my war wound, an absent toe. It was all pretty sudden, much more sudden than the beginning. And it was pretty hard to believe that we were suddenly free. It was, in many cases, the Japanese were pretty upset about the whole thing, and I know that our one thought was to get home. For most of us, I don't think anybody felt like tearing down amongst the Japanese and belting people around. We had quite suddenly realised that it was over. Almost impossible to believe. But anyway, they thought I had tuberculosis, and I had a bad cough, and I was 7 stone, and they put me on an aeroplane, and I was taken over to an island somewhere or other in the middle. I can't remember now the name of the island. There was one other, an officer from my unit, a captain, and they thought he had tuberculosis, and they flew him home, and he died within a week or so of getting home. But I was put on a ship. I ate luscious food, and by the time I got home I must have looked pretty normal.